so not very many people know this, but Halo 6 was actually made back in 2016, and instead of being developed by 343 Industries, it was developed by id Software. And instead of being some shitty Halo game, it was the best first-person shooter ever made. Oh, wait a minute, that wasn't Halo 6. Doom Eternal, the sequel to the critically acclaimed Doom. Not the old 1993 Doom that could run on a toaster, but the 2016 Doom that could run on an iPod Shuffle. Doom 2016 wasn't a perfect video game, but it was pretty dang close. It took what made classic 90s FPS games great: enemy variety, weapon variety, fast-paced movement and combat, secrets, hell, they didn't even include reloading, which has become a staple in most FPS games today. And all that was blended with elements found in modern games like upgradable weapons and armor, perks, and a Z-axis. Holy shit! Doom guy has a neck! He has a neck! But you don't need me to tell you why Doom is great. It's Doom. Now, let me tell you why Doom is great. Something about the girl. The music is amazing. Doom 2016 had a great soundtrack that would change and adjust itself according to what was going on during combat. And not just that, it was good. And with Doom Eternal, Mick Gordon definitely kicked it up a few notches. I don't personally really even like metal music that much, but even I have to admit that there are some bangers in this soundtrack. Sometimes I'll just pull up a song from the soundtrack on YouTube and listen to it in the background while I'm doing something else. And this is definitely not the kind of genre I usually listen to. Which is why it's a real shame that for the TV spot trailer they decided to go with this. This is my mission. I'm here for purpose. I give them that vision. We put it on. Giving that rhythm so everything sounds as the day. Even though there was a story going on in Doom 2016, it wasn't really shoved in your face, and because of this, you were free to just shoot demons if you wanted, or you could pay attention to what's going on and look into the backstories of everything. Doom 2016 was great with subtle storytelling, and this is very apparent with the Doom Slayer. Never in the game did he say a single word, and we never even saw his face, but there was so much personality in all of his actions and animations that he proved to be just as good, or in some cases, even a better character than a lot of characters in games with heavy focus on story and character development. In Doom Eternal, the Doomslayer still excels at showing his character through his actions rather than dialogue. Doom Eternal's story by itself does seem mildly interesting, but the way it was presented and the way all the characters were presented, it just made everything pretty uninteresting and forgettable. And that's not to say there weren't cool moments, because there definitely were. Seeing all the crazy shite happening in the backgrounds of levels was awesome. The bosses were all amazing, and it was especially cool to see the icon of Sin make his return. And this time, with fingers. Overall, the story was adequate at best, but it's a Doom game, so I mean, really, who the hell cares? Cutscenes, on the other hand, are slightly more annoying. Doom Eternal opens with a ridiculously great cutscene. But throughout the campaign, I feel like Doom Eternal went a bit overboard with cutscenes. Ultimately, it doesn't really affect the overall game all that much, but it's just a bit annoying to have to skip a cutscene every 10 minutes when most of the cutscenes don't really even serve any purpose and would have been cooler to see in first person without having the control taken away from you. Now I'm going to cover the real reason people buy Doom. You absolute loser! All you do is play Minecraft! You are a loser! Battle Mode seems pretty interesting from the 6 games I've played. The matchmaking is absolutely horrible though. I only ever get into about 1/10 of the games I try to find, and half of those lobbies I get into close before the game even starts. And half the games I get into are laggy as hell. It's hard to really say much about the actual battle mode itself, since getting into a good match is nearly impossible. But from what I have played, it's a pretty decent game mode to play when you want to try something different from the campaign. I think I personally would have preferred a more refined deathmatch arena shooter multiplayer similar to Doom 2016, and I know the multiplayer in 2016 got a lot of hate, but I honestly thought it was pretty alright. It just had a really low player base, and with some tweaks to the game mode it could have been really great. And again, that's not to say that I think battle mode is bad. When the game is working properly and you're working together with your demon partner or making split decisions as the Slayer, it's pretty hard to not have fun in the battle mode. Now I'm going to cover the real reason people buy Doom. Yeah, it's pretty alright. Typically when people play Doom, it's mainly for one thing: the ridiculously fast and intense combat. Doom 2016 nearly perfected combat, with the large assortment of weapons, the glory kill system, the runes that give you different perks during the fights, the army of different and unique demons that keep the mini encounters fresh, and the fast-paced movement of the Slayer. Doom Eternal improves on pretty much everything. It's also very different from Doom 2016. There's a much bigger emphasis on ammo management, strategic weapon selection for specific demons, and traversal through the arenas. Ammo is much more scarce in this game, making the chainsaw a necessary tool, rather than something you'll only use like 6 times in one playthrough, kinda like it was in Doom 2016. I would honestly just forget the chainsaw existed sometimes in my Doom 2016 playthroughs, but in Doom Eternal, if you don't use the chainsaw, you will die. There's just no way around that. The limited ammo also forces you to choose what weapon you use against what demons a lot more carefully. Caca demons are a bitch and a half if you just try shooting them normally, but with the shoulder-mounted grenade launcher or your combat shotgun sticky bombs, you can kill it in like 2 seconds and get a health boost from the glory kill. Arachnotrons have a turret on their back that can be shot off to make them easier to deal with. The Revenant's shoulder cannons are destructible as well, and the Mancubus's arms can be destroyed. And you can even shoot off chunks of flesh from every demon in this game. The whole destructible demons mechanic is amazingly satisfying. But while I think all of this is objectively an improvement to the gameplay, I must admit that it does take away a bit of the freedom that you had in Doom 2016. Doom 2016 was more of a demon-killing sandbox, where you could use your arsenal of weapons to take out different demons in different ways. Or, I mean, you could have just fully upgraded the super shotgun that kills pretty much every enemy in the game in under 2 seconds. Whereas Doom Eternal is more of a rhythm game, kind of like DDR, except all the music is heavy metal and all the arrows are demons that have to be taken out a certain way. Eternal's gameplay is definitely more intense and fast than Doom 2016, and at the end of the day, that's why I played Doom. With that said, however, I will definitely be revisiting and replaying Doom 2016, as well as Doom Eternal in the future, simply because of how different both games are in style, tone, and gameplay. Although I have a feeling that when I'm playing through Doom 2016 in the future, I'm gonna really miss all the new movement mechanics from Doom Eternal, like the monkey bars, the dash, and the freaking grappling hook. They all add so much to what was already a masterpiece formula for first-person shooter combat. The monkey bars help you get around the arenas more fluidly. The dash is implemented in a way with the combat to where it forces you to use it frequently, but also to use it strategically. If you run out of dash juice when you're surrounded by enemies, you're gonna get hit for a lot of damage. And on higher difficulties like Nightmare, that can be a death sentence.
Audio Jungle.
So yeah, Doom Eternal's added a lot of new mechanics, and I can see why that might be worrying to some. Too many mechanics might overcomplicate what used to be a simple "shoot the bad guy"
kind of game, but all of the new mechanics have been added with a very specific purpose for each of them in mind. So there's always a lot to keep track of in the middle of a battle, and when the Marauder shows up, just quit the game and cry about how unfair he is. I mean, really, all you have to do to beat this guy is run far away from him so that you can dodge his axe projectiles easier. As soon as he does the Officer Earl run, you know he's gonna flash his eyes green, and that's when you can prepare to hit him with your super shotgun, swap to your ballista, hit him again, and you only have to do that like 3 times to kill him. Or if you're feeling real fancy, you could just throw sticky bombs on the ground next to him and kill him by doing that. Or if you're feeling really fancy, you could do the quick swap technique where you just hit him in the back infinitely until he dies. Though I'll admit, when there's other demons in the room and he decides to show up in the midst of a huge battle, he can change the gameplay up for sure. But as long as the gameplay remains fast and intense, which it does, I don't think it's a bad thing to change it up from time to time.
I'm just gonna lather the liquid white all... This is not gonna work. I forgot to put it in there. Oh, it's burning my mouth!
Doom games have always had sort of a slight feeling of horror, but Doom Eternal took a more light, cartoonish approach for its style. When enemies drop ammo, it looks like a rainbow is blasting out of them. The faces of the enemies show more expression, environments have a lot more color variation, and even the UI uses a bunch of light colors to display everything. But if you want to change your UI colors, the settings give plenty of other options that are all pretty neat as well. The change in tone isn't really bad, I don't think. However, personally, I prefer the darker tone of 2016, even if its environments are a bit samey and are at times a bit overly dark. A middle ground between the dark tone of 2016 and the light cartoonish feel of Eternal would be optimal, but what we got with Eternal is good nonetheless. Now, let's talk about tutorials. They aren't super great. I know you can just turn them off in the menu, but if it's your first time playing the game, or especially if it's your first Doom game, you're gonna miss a lot of vital information. I think a better way to deal with the tutorials in a game like Doom would be to give the player access to the new mechanic right before they're put into a scenario where the new mechanic can be utilized to its full potential, and just put a button prompt in front of the player. The flow of the game isn't interrupted, the player learns exactly what their new weapon or skill can do, it's fast, and it's simple. Many people say the Slayer gates are the height of the game, and I would honestly have to agree. It's a real shame that the only way to even start them is to go through half of an entire mission. I think once you've beaten the Slayer Gate in the campaign levels, you should be able to unlock them to play from the Fortress of Doom or from the main menu whenever you wanted. There's really only one part of the game that ever really gets as intense as the Slayer Gates are, and that's the Master levels. The Master levels are basically just normal levels from the campaign, but they've been redesigned to have a much tougher combination of enemies. The Master levels are just as good, if not better, than the Slayer Gates. At least, when I can play them, that is. The Master levels just don't even work most of the time, and I'm not the only person who's run into this issue. It's a real shame too, because nearly everything about this game has been nearly flawless, and this is just such a glaring issue. I really hope this gets patched soon and it isn't a reoccurring problem for future Master levels.
Okay.
Like I said when talking about the combat, glory kills and chainsaw kills are a lot more necessary in Doom Eternal, and because of this, I feel like there should be a larger variety of animations for both. Don't get me wrong, there are already a lot, and I know that with more demons comes more glory kills, so we probably were lucky to get even as many as we did. However, with how many times you have to chainsaw dudes, and how similar a lot of the kill animations feel, it would be nice to have more animations with a creative variety of kills. With the chainsaw, you'll almost never be using it on anything except imps, soldiers, and possessed, and each of them only have like 2 different chainsaw kill animations. That gives a total of 6 animations, and since you'll use the chainsaw like 200 times throughout one campaign, that's a lot of the same exact animation over and over. Something a few people seem to dislike about Eternal is the fact that the chainsaw used to be a get out of a shit situation free card that you could use to kill any demon in one hit as long as you had enough fuel. But now you'll pretty much only ever be using it on the fodder enemies for ammo. And to this complaint I say, use the Crucible. It's got 3 charges and, like the chainsaw, is an insta-kill. But unlike the chainsaw, the Crucible uses 1 charge no matter how big the demon it kills is. I'll admit though, the Crucible's animations are kinda lame. Like, yeah, obviously it's cool to slash demons in half with a huge glowing energy sword, but nearly every single Crucible kill animation is the same exact horizontal or vertical slice. I just feel like the animations could have been a bit more creative. Like, what if the Slayer punched a demon with the hilt, and then activated the sword, cutting its head off with the activation of the sword? or stabbing a demon in the chest and pulling the sword up, kinda similar to that one glory kill. Even a normal decapitation would have helped make the Crucible more fun to use. Now, in Doom 2016, there was absolutely nothing in the game that made you feel as badass and unstoppable as the Berserk power-up. You were ripping dudes' heads in half, you were punching holes in their chests. It was absolutely insane. In Doom Eternal, there's much less focus on the power-ups, which is fine, honestly. However, I do find it a bit sad that throughout Doom Eternal's campaign, you get Berserk one time, and it definitely feels like a downgrade from 2016. Every demon has like one Berserk kill animation of their own, and some of the animations are shared between demons. Now, the animations that are there are really good, but with Berserk, you're supposed to be killing shite like every second. And when you pull an imp in half the same exact way 3 times in a row in under 8 seconds, it just feels really weird, and it doesn't flow very well. I know the power-ups and animations seem like an extremely nitpicky thing to talk about, probably because it is, but when you have a game as nearly perfect as Doom Eternal, tiny little nitpicky things like that show a lot harder than they would in other games. At this moment, Doom Eternal is my favorite first-person shooter. It took Doom 2016 and overhauled the combat system to be more challenging, fast, and strategic. And not only that, but the music hits just as hard, if not harder, than Doom 2016's soundtrack. Not to mention the unlockables, which made me feel the need to 100% the game as soon as I finished my first playthrough. Something I never did with Doom 2016 in over 4 playthroughs.
Bouge, bouge. Enfin, bouge, faut mettre là-bas, ça va être. Oh.